I am to explain the nature of holiness, and I shall give you a brief definition of it, and then mention some of those dispositions and practices which naturally flow from it. The most intelligible description of holiness, as it is inherent in us, may be this: it is a conformity in heart and practice to the revealed will of God. As the Supreme Being is the standard of all perfection, His holiness in particular is the standard of ours. Then we are holy, when His image is stamped upon our hearts and reflected in our lives. So the Apostle defines it, that ye put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness, Ephesians 4:24. Whom He did predestinate to be conformed to the image of His Son, Romans 8:29. Hence, holiness may be defined a conformity to God in His moral perfections. But as we cannot have a distinct knowledge of these perfections, but as they are manifested by the revealed will of God, I choose to define holiness as above, a conformity to His revealed will. Now, His revealed will comprises both the law and the gospel. The law informs us of the duty which we as creatures owe to God as a being of supreme excellency, as our Creator and benefactor, and to men as our fellow creatures. And the gospel informs us of the duty which as sinners we owe to God as reconcilable through a mediator. Our obedience to the former implies the whole of morality, and to the latter the whole of evangelical graces, as faith in a mediator, repentance, etc. From this definition of holiness, it appears on the one hand that it is absolutely necessary to see the Lord. For unless our dispositions are conformed to Him, we cannot be happy in the enjoyment of Him. And on the other hand, that they who are made thus holy are prepared for the vision and fruition of His face, as they can relish the divine pleasure. But as a concise definition of holiness may give an auditory but very imperfect ideas of it, I shall expatiate upon the dispositions and practices in which it consists, or which naturally result from it, and they are such as follow. A delight in God for His holiness. Self-love may prompt us to love Him for His goodness to us, and so many unregenerate men may have a selfish love to God on this account. But to love God because He is infinitely holy, because He bears an infinite detestation to all sin, and will not indulge His creatures in the neglect of the least instance of holiness, but commands them to be holy as He is holy, this is a disposition co-natural to a renewed soul only, and argues a conformity to His image. Every nature is most agreeable to itself, and a holy nature is most agreeable to a holy nature. Here I would make a remark which may God deeply impress on your hearts, and which for that purpose I shall subjoin to each particular, that holiness in fallen man is supernatural. I mean, we are not born with it. We give no discoveries of it till we have experienced a great change. Thus we find it in the present case. We have no natural love to God because of His infinite purity and hatred to all sin. Nay, we would love Him more did He give us greater indulgences. And I am afraid the love of some persons is founded upon a mistake. They love Him because they imagine He does not hate sin, nor them for it, so much as He really does, because they do not expect that He is so inexorably just in His dealings with the sinner. It is no wonder they love such a soft, easy, passive being as this imaginary deity. But did they see the luster of that holiness of God which dazzles the celestial armies? Did they but know the terrors of His justice and His implacable indignation against sin, their innate enmity would show its poison, and their hearts would rise against God, and all those horrible blasphemies with which awakened sinners are so frequently shocked. Such love as this is so far from being acceptable that it is the greatest affront to the Supreme Being, as if a profligate loved you on the mistaken supposition that you were such a libertine as Himself. It would rather inflame your indignation than procure your respect. But to a regenerate mind, how strong, how transporting are the charms of holiness. Such a mind joins the anthem of seraphs with the divinest complacency, Revelation 4:8, and anticipates the song of glorified saints. Who shall not fear Thee, O Lord, and glorify Thy name? For Thou only art holy. Revelation 15:4. The perfections of God lose their luster or sink into objects of terror or contempt if this glorious attribute is abstracted. Without holiness, power becomes tyranny, omniscience, craft, justice, revenge, and cruelty, and even the amiable attribute of goodness loses its charms and degenerates into a blind, promiscuous prodigality or foolish, undiscerning fondness. But when these perfections are clothed in the beauties of holiness, how godlike, how majestic, how lovely and attractive do they appear. And with what complacence does a mind fashioned after the divine image acquiesce in them? It may appear amiable even to an unholy sinner that the exertions of almighty power should be regulated by the most consummate wisdom, that justice should not without distinction punish the guilty and innocent, but a holy soul only can rejoice at divine goodness, will not communicate happiness to the disgrace of holiness, and that rather than it should overflow in blind promiscuous manner, the whole human race should be miserable. A selfish sinner has nothing in view but his own happiness, and if this be obtained, he has no anxiety about the illustration of divine purity, but it recommends happiness itself to a sanctified soul, that it cannot be communicated in a way inconsistent with the beauties of holiness.